Welcome to Sparks by PRCA, a podcast series channel. This episode is part of the podcast series special, Mindful Communicators, Promoting Mental Resilience.
Hello, my name is Patrick Melville. I'm a mental health expert, and I'm working with PRCA to build the mental resilience in the industry. Every organization and individual is on their own path, and I'm so pleased to have a senior member of the industry with me today. Welcome to Whitney Simon, Senior Account Director and Head of DE&I at Missive, a London-based comms and PR consultancy that specializes in technology. Hi, Whitney.
Hi, Patrick. It's so great to be here. I'm really excited to talk about something that means so much to me personally, but also it's so important if we're to move the PR industry forward.
Yes, we'd love to hear your thoughts about this. And let's go straight into the questions. Could you share why you think that this program is important for the industry?
Since COVID, there has been an overall acknowledgement of the importance of mental health and mental resilience when we think about practitioners. We can't separate the person from the job. These things are intertwined. And, you know, we are going through a period of time of a lot of upheaval. And as PR practitioners, we are on the front line of that, consuming that information, digesting that information, and then being able to put it out for our clients, customers. And that comes with a lot of mental burden. And so I think these kinds of programs are super important to help us understand how to navigate the inundation of news while also, you know, being able to bring every version of ourselves to work and to continue doing our jobs in a really impactful way.
One of the things that is really prominent is the fast pace. And it's not just the speed, is it? It's the workload. It's also the types of work. Are there any specific challenges, the kind of drivers of stress that you've seen?
Absolutely. And I can talk about it from a macro level and kind of a micro level. So from a macro level, when we think about the business climate this year, it has been really tough for agencies. Over the past year, we've seen a number of really fantastic agencies shut down. We've had a lot of, you know, clients within the tech space in particular have a lot of layoffs, which impacts, you know, the first kind of budget that gets cut or removed tends to be PR and comms. And so that's had wide-scale ramifications for our industry. And that is stressful to hear about, you know, your colleagues being made redundant, to hear about agencies shutting down. So that's one thing. The current state of affairs is just overwhelming. Every other day, there is just a mass crisis happening, whether it's the Palestinian struggle right now, whether it's talking about what's happening in Sudan and Congo, whether it's just talking about the state of the planet in terms of climate change. It just feels as though our role is constantly having to digest all of these really traumatic and overwhelming things. And then I also think, you know, to wrap up the macro, we're looking at a shift in the working landscape. We went from everyone was fully remote. Everyone talked about how amazing it is that we were able to be so productive. Then we got out of that. We started talking a bit about hybrid and how we can make that work. And now the pendulum has kind of swung and we're back to this, you know, increasing narrative of we need people to be back in work 4 or 5 days a week. And it has been really jerky. It's something that me and my colleagues at my agency are regularly talking about. On a micro level. PR in and of itself is something that is knee-jerk. It goes as quickly as the news cycle. And as I just mentioned, there is always something new. And so that can be really difficult because in PR, you don't have a moment to kind of take a step back and reflect on the amazing work that you've done. It's just on to the next one, on to the next client. And there is this need to be perfect because we are delivering comms that can make or break a business. And so it's just when you combine those two things, it's a lot.
And it sounds like just the word that comes to my mind is expectation.
Yep.
And different, like what does the industry expect? What do clients expect? And of course, it's trying to find that time to focus on the real expectations from these massive changes. I mean, they are on a big scale. And it sounds like that's exactly what you've sort of role to manage as well. So in terms of managing those roles, what are your thoughts about, I mean, under the theme of building a mental resilience to manage these sudden and highly stressful moments?
Personally, for me, I've gone through this kind of journey of recognizing my role to play in managing boundaries. And I think when we think about boundaries, sometimes it can feel like this negative thing, but really what it is recognizing when I have hit my limit and I need to take a step back. And we are the only people that can do that for ourselves. We are the only people that can articulate that for ourselves. But sometimes we're in these situations where we also want to do a good job. So we feel as though we have to carry the burden. We feel as though we need to manage everything. And it kind of, it stems from that perfectionism. But it also leads to a lot of burnout because no one person can do everything, especially in PR. And so I think one of the things that as a line manager, I always try to tell the people that I work with, and even outside of just like people that I directly manage, it's about recognizing what makes a fantastic PR practitioner and a fantastic employee in any industry is recognizing what you can and cannot do. You're not a good leader because you take on everything and you don't give things away and you're perfect. You're a good leader when you recognize that, you know what, I don't have capacity to manage all of this. Let me ask for help. You're a good leader when you recognize, you know what, I've had a really tough couple of weeks. I'm navigating some personal things that have impacted my ability to be in the office. I apologize if I came across short. Let's have a conversation to, unpack whatever, difficult conversation we had to have. It's about being human.
Yes, and exactly right. And I think one of the conundrums that people have is that they compare themselves to yesterday and last week, and it sounds like that's a good way to build that resilience, to give that person some freedom to, one, share it, and two, do some work, and not to compare themselves to maybe they did do a good job in exactly the same scenario, but things have changed, and that's where the resilience comes in. So those conversations you have, where do you have them? When do you have them?
I feel really lucky at Missive that I have, it's a boutique agency. We have about 25 or so people. So it is fairly small, and I'm able to have these conversations with my senior leaders, but also with the people that I manage, but also with my clients. And I think the important element that runs through all of that is that level of trust. I feel like I've been able to become the leader that I am because I am not scared of admitting when, I'm at a low or I've had a wobble. And so, for example, one of my clients, he is a Jewish man. And when everything was happening in Gaza, he very much was just was shaken. And, he has a child and had to kind of navigate having these conversations with his child. And even we didn't have a client call that day, but each of the people on my team reached out to him and were just like, listen, we understand that right now it's a really difficult time. If you want to move our client call, we're more than happy to do that. But also if there's anything that you need us to be supportive, please let us know how we can help. And that is a relationship that we've built over time because he's not just our client. He's a person. He's someone that, we're friends with, that we care about. And likewise. So, when I had some issues with my father-in-law who, had a stroke, and I've had health issues, he's always the first person to check in on me and be like, how are you? And it's the same with my co-founders and with people that I lead. It's about understanding that, just because you're a professional doesn't mean that you don't feel, that you don't have, the world shift out from under you. We all have seen that. COVID has been that great equalizer.
And I think what word comes to mind, which you said, is the human side. We are humans. And I think that trust comes in those relationships. Can I ask about once you notice a warning sign, how do you speak to that person, or how do you encourage them to share and maybe take some time to focus on that resilience?
It's different for every person. So in the past, I've had someone that I've line managed where I just noticed that they just weren't as enthusiastic as they typically were. Okay. And honestly, the way that I started is just checking in hey, how are things going? How are you outside of work? That person opened up and was just like, work has been really stressful. I'm dealing with a lot of personal things with my family. And we were able to have a conversation about that. But there have been situations where you'll have people who don't feel comfortable talking about that. And there's also something to be said about being able to understand, like, totally appreciate, you don't want to share what you're going through. I am here if you do need it in the future. I can refer you to other resources that you will feel comfortable with. I think, again, we as humans, we want to help. Like, I know as a line manager, I just want everyone that works with me to feel supported and empowered. But there's some people who don't want to, like, have that personal side at work. And that is important to recognize and acknowledge as well.
And what I like is that you can signpost them. That's one of the key words. Once you've had this conversation and when you want to check, what kind of signposts are used in your agency? What kind of places do you push people to go and do? For example, you mentioned mental health first aiders.
Yep, definitely. So we have 4. We just had one new person become a mental health first aider. And whenever someone starts at the business, we highlight that as, one of the benefits, I guess you could say, about working at Missive, is that if you are in a situation where you don't have access to therapy or you don't feel comfortable talking to your manager, these are the 4 people who have been trained and are able to support you as you're navigating any type of mental health conditions, if you're dealing with burnout. And so that is something that has been very helpful. And then even when you drill down into speaking to the mental health first aiders, they have different practices and resources that you can use to basically figure out a plan to help you navigate this period of time when you're in the workplace and, ideally going beyond that.
I think the word that comes to mind is relationships, and you build that trust, you build that listening skills, and through those kind of sort of knowledge, background knowledge, to be able to validate what you're saying. Where relationships could be with your colleagues, your team, the senior members, other people. What about outside the agency life? What about, there's client side as well, which is a key driver of stress. Is there anything that you would share or give some experience with where the relationship with clients can be a driver of stress, and how that's brought into ways to help?
Everything that I do, it's from a human-centric approach. And so with my clients, what I recognize is they're not just pushing down on us because they want to do that.
Yes.
They're pushing down on us because whereas we have a team of people at an agency, they're 1 or 2 people in a massive organization who most likely doesn't recognize or appreciate the important role that comms and PR plays. So they're trying to justify the work that they're doing. They have internal pressures that we're not aware of. And so I think recognizing that we all are beholden to someone else, and a lot of the time the actions, we're humans, right? We're imperfect. So it'd be great if we could be in a world where when I'm stressed out, I don't take it out on anybody else in my circle.
Yes.
It's not the way that life works. Sometimes life takes hold, it gets overwhelming, and we do lash out in ways that, we probably shouldn't. With my clients in particular, we've been able to get to a really fantastic spot where they themselves can tell us when they're stressed out. And so we as PR practitioners, we're not playing this game of, oh, they're really upset, it's because we're not doing a good job. We've already started having conversations about, okay, the other person on my team is going to be out on holiday for 2 weeks. I'm really stressed out because I have this other campaign. So we understand, okay, this is a stressful time. How can we help them? And again, and I think it's also vice versa. Like, we're very open with our clients about, this is where we're at on an agency side. Obviously, our job is to deliver the best work possible, but these are kind of the parameters with which we need to do that in over the next period of time because of whatever.
And that's a really interesting point, because the performance of building mental resilience is not as tangible, as, of course, as clicks and reading and all those metrics that we're used to. If there's the closest thing to a metric with the kind of work, the resilience that's being done, is it the delivery of work? Is it the number of maybe honest conversations. You're an agency of size where you could have those honest chats as well. Anything come to mind?
I think number of conversations is a really solid one. And not to say that whenever you're in a meeting, you're like, oh, tick, but it's more just like, as you look at your workforce, thinking about what have been the stages for your employee life cycle. So I guess typically I work with some clients that focus on employee sentiment. They basically say that before someone quits or before someone gets signed off on sick leave, you have a number of indicators to see like something's not right. But oftentimes what happens is that you will see people just they'll fall off in their quality of work. And it's only after a week or two that you get kind of that conversation of like, I can't handle this. I'm dealing with this. I'm dealing with this. Over the past year, we've had a number of people within the business who have been dealing with a lot of personal things, myself included. And throughout kind of those periods of time, through conversations with my colleagues, I've been really impressed with how people really trust their line managers with kind of these really personal things, whether it's, okay, I just found out that my dad is in the hospital. I think within a day of me finding out, I went to my manager and was like, hey, this is happening to me, feeling really overwhelmed. There was another colleague who also had some, issues with her father-in-law. And again, within like a short period of time, it's like these conversations were had and they came up with a plan of action together. That person wasn't just stuck doing it on their own, because that's also really difficult.
Yes, and that sounds like it's a good collaboration. You're working together. What are your thoughts about, things to consider for, 2024?
Thinking about mental health from an intersectional perspective is something that we at Missive are thinking about a lot, and I encourage other people to do. I think often we think about, it's kind of how we think about DE&I too. It just seems like this all-encompassing phrase, but realistically, mental health is something that is specific to every individual. You cannot take a blanket approach to supporting, one employee versus another. It is something, mental health is something that should be bespoke and is something that should be done in collaboration with people. And so something that I'm really passionate about is recognizing that, depending on where you're from, your socioeconomic background, your gender, your sexual orientation, your needs when it comes to mental health are going to be completely different. And employees recognize and appreciate an employer that sees that and doesn't just think it's a tick box exercise that, one yoga class at the end of work, once every quarter is going to be enough to solve burnout in this industry.
Yes. And that's exactly what I think everyone's learning about. Every business, every organization, every team, every account is unique. As we finish, I would love you to share, what are your thoughts about that people can take away? The listeners here, if you can give a couple of tips.
So I think one really simple one that you can take away, and I've seen a lot of really great conversations as a result of it from an account management, a line manager perspective, is when you're starting off in meetings, those first 5 minutes, you don't have to jump straight into work. Taking those first 5 minutes to ask a question like, how is everyone feeling on a scale of 1 to 5? It is a small gesture that shows that you see people for who they are, not for what they can deliver to your account teams. Sometimes you'll have answers where it's like, I'm a 4, I'm a 5, and that's great. And sometimes you'll have a 1 or a 2. And depending on if it's like a 1-to-1 situation or a team meeting, you can then, if it's in a team meeting, you can then pick up with them offline and say, hey, I hear that you're not doing very well. Is there anything that I can do? Is there anything that I can, support? That one small gesture not only makes someone feel seen, but again, makes them feel as though they are not alone in navigating whatever they're going through. So I think that's a really fantastic one.
And can I just add to that? I think that's also a talent in the PR and comms industry, that, if you get a brief from a client, you have to respond in a certain way, isn't it? So I think that a lot of those softer skills really can be beneficial to what you've said.
Another one is about creating spaces for collective learning and emotional processing. And bear with me here. I think when we think about work, it very much is like benefits feels like this transactional thing. It's like, I come in, you give me an activity, you give me food, you give me a speaker, and then that's it. what I have found is that often what someone wants to feel from their business is that they see them. They understand that things are hard. They understand that it's not rosy. And creating spaces where people can come and just feel together. It sounds very airy-fairy, but can process what's going on in this world is really important. At Missive, I launched a series called Seat at the Table, and it's also an offering that I have as part of my DE&I consultancy. And it's all about creating space for people to have conversations about difficult things, so that they feel as though, you know, not only am I learning from a professional perspective, but I'm learning as a human. I'm learning how to be a better individual in society who's moving the needle forward outside of my 9 to 5. And I think that can be a really interesting thing to do. Think about ways to create bond within your employee base, but also to make them recognize that you understand that we are living in some seriously unprecedented times, and that you want to help them navigate that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for those tips.
Thank you so much, Patrick. This has been super fantastic.